Everyone, and welcome back to our special edition of Brett's Brain, where we're walking you through a framework and best practices of how to build a fundraising process. We call it Fundraise Faster. The goal of this presentation is to help you maximize your chance at closing a round of venture capital. This is part 3. If you haven't had a chance, go back, watch part 1, part 2, and then come back and watch this episode. All right, next key step is doing some research. If you think about the first session we did, that first month was doing research and doc prep. We haven't even talked about anything beyond that yet. Fund research is a key element that a lot of companies don't think about or don't do. They just go out willy-nilly, start pitching everybody. It's really important to do your research up front. This is for a couple of reasons. First, it can save you a tremendous amount of time. You don't want to pitch a fund that's never going to invest in you. If you're a food tech company and a fund has never invested in food tech in the past, they're probably not going to invest in you. Don't waste your time. Don't waste their time. Fundraising is a full-time job. You're going to have to pitch 60, 70, 80 people to close your round in many cases. You want to be focused on people that could potentially be investors. So do your research up front. While it is time-consuming, it actually can save you time in the long run. The other reason that fund research is really important is those people that invest in your company, they're going to be on your cap table until you exit. It is next to impossible to get an investor off your cap table. You want to bring people in that are well aligned with your mission, your vision, your strategy, your timeline, all of these things. You also want people in, ideally, that can help you. Funds that are more well aligned with what you're doing are more likely to be able to help you with biz dev intros, with employee intros, with other investor intros. Those are all things that you should be thinking about while you're doing your fund research. And the final reason, which might be a bit less obvious, that's important to do fund research is it can actually help you get warm introductions into those funds. And we're going to talk about how that might work right now. So this is an example of a doc that I recommend every single company startup puts together. It's your fund pitch doc, right? This is your CRM, for example. I would use a Google Sheet. And you're going to start putting in tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And you just want to fill this up with all of your potential leads or potential investors. Tier 1 is those funds that are well positioned from a stage perspective. So if you're raising a seed round, they're seed stage investors. From a vertical perspective, if you're food tech, they're food tech investors. And they're your dream investor for some other reason. You really like their blog. You've heard them speak and you really agree, or it feels like the culture is a great match with you. These are the people that, if you could have your choice, the first fund there, that's who the first fund is. If you could pick anybody in the world, that's your tier 1 investors. Tier 2 is your investors that are stage appropriate and vertical appropriate. But for whatever reason, you just might not know as much about them. They might not be that dream investor. You've never read their blog, right? But they're still a really good fit for your fund, for your company. Tier 3 tends to be more of those generalists, or there's a little bit less information out there about them. They're a bit broader. We invest in lots of stages, or we invest in lots of verticals. And that is going to be your biggest bucket of potential investors, because there's a lot of those out there. And you're going to dedicate time based on what tier these funds are in. You're going to put a lot of time and effort into doing research on tier 1 funds and trying to get warm intros into those tier 1 funds. You're going to network your way to them. Your tier 3 funds, you're not going to put as much time and effort into that. You just don't have that time. It's a scarce resource as a founder. But that tier 1 and tier 2, you're going to want to put a lot of time into those. You're going to really want to work to those introductions. Now, what you're going to do with this Google Sheet and why you use a Google Sheet and how you use it to get those warm intros. You're going to fill it out. You're going to give some really detailed reasons of why you think the fund might be a good fit. And then you're going to send this Google Sheet out and share it out to all of your mentors, investors, advisors. And you see the column where it says intro from, and that intro from column, you're going to leave that blank and you're going to tell those people, hey, if you can make an introduction to these funds, we have a living document where people are going to fill their name in. I'd love it if you could put your name there, and I'll send you a forwardable email that you can then use to send off to your contact at that fund to see if they're willing to take a meeting. And we're going to talk a little bit more about affordable email in a second. And what that does is now all of a sudden I get a list from a founder because I'm an existing early investor, and it's got 60 funds. It shows me why they think that fund is a good fit for them. I can put some notes in and tell you, hey, this fund actually not a good fit, or this fund isn't actively investing right now. Don't waste your time. So I might be able to help save you some time. But more importantly, I could put my name next to a bunch of funds that I can make a warm intro to for you. And then all you have to do is send me an email that I can forward off. Rather than going out and randomly asking, hey, Brett, do you know any funds that might be interested in investing? Well, yeah, I probably do. I know lots of funds. But it's much easier to get introductions if you send specifics. And sending a Google Sheet like this is a great way to send specifics and show that you've done the work first. Anytime that you show you've put the effort in or done work first, people are more likely to help you or more likely to make those introductions for you, because we know how serious you're going to take them. And it takes work off our plate. Instead of me having to go through my Rolodex or whomever I know and think, okay, is this a good fit? Is this a good fit? You've done that work for me. All I have to do is send an email and make that introduction. This Google Sheet is a great secret tool to help you get introductions and also to organize your fundraise process. Okay, reaching out. Obviously, you're going to start with the people in your personal network, people that you've talked to already. Wait to reach out, though, and we're going to talk about why that's a key element to close it later. But you're going to start with those really warm introductions, people that know you, believe in you, trust you as a human being first. Try and get some leverage there. Try and get some early commitments from those folks. Then you're going to go through that warm intro process. You're going to reach out to that immediate network you have with your Google Sheet, and you're going to ask for other introductions. That's going to take a little bit more time. It's going to be a little bit longer process, but do the work up front, and that'll accelerate it. Now cold. Let's say you don't have any, you're done, you don't have the round closed. You're going to need to start doing some cold outreach. The key to cold outreach is twofold. One, make it as customizable as you possibly can. Very rarely do I open an email or take an email seriously from, a random mail merged doc or mail merged email that, hey, Brett, saw you invest in startups. Here's my company. That you just don't get meetings that way. The ones that I do open and do oftentimes meet with are the ones that are very specific. Hey, Brett, saw you speak at X, Y, and Z. I know you really like robotics and food tech right now, blah, blah, blah. They took the effort and to research what we were into investing on right now, and other things like that. It shows that effort. It shows what kind of a founder you are. If you're going to do cold, make it specific, which also makes it incredibly time consuming. A cool little hack on cold reach out is thinking about ways to make them go from cold to warm. So obviously you can work your immediate network and see if you can get to warm introductions. And there's a lot of tools out for that. But another good option is if you really want to meet a fund, go to their portfolio and see if you know any of the founders in their portfolio, or cold reach out to that portfolio company first and build a relationship there. And again, that's a much longer path. But if you hit it off with a founder that's in a fund's portfolio, and then that founder makes the warm intro for you, that really can go a long way. It is certainly better than you cold reaching out on your own, even though it might have taken a couple extra steps. It increases your chance at success around closing that investor. We're going to talk a little bit about the first pitch. We're not going to go crazy deep here. But again, you're going to tailor your pitches for your investors, especially for those tier one. You already know a lot about them if they're tier one investors. So tailor your pitch to them. What do they like? What are they into? Change your deck. Do a lot of work for those tier ones. For your tier threes, you're probably going to use your more generic deck and walk through your pitch. But once you get that meeting, even for your tier threes, I would tell you to make sure you do your research on that fund and what they're into. And you might have to change your deck, but you can change the way you talk about things based on what types of interests they have. What have they written about? What have they invested in? So make sure you tailor your pitch. It really, really shows a strong founder when they've done research. Ask questions. Every single meeting I have with an entrepreneur, I ask, what questions do you have for us? And when they say none, or, hey, I've read your website, I've done a lot of research on you, I really don't have any questions, where's your curiosity? There's got to be something that we talked about in the meeting that you'd like an opinion on or my thoughts on. And even if you don't care about my thoughts, pretend a little bit. Have good questions. Know your numbers. This is a real personal pet peeve of mine. If you are a CEO of a company, you need to know all of your key metrics and KPIs. You might not need to know some random number that's not important to your business. But if you tell me, if I ask you what a KPI is, hey, what's your revenue? How much revenue did you? How many active users do you have? What's your customer acquisition cost, especially if you're an e-commerce company? These things that are KPIs that are key to your business, If you don't know those as CEO, you're done. Sometimes you'll get, oh, my CFO handles that. Like at early stage, like I don't want a fractional CFO to be handling my numbers. I want the CEO to know them and know them cold. You got to know your numbers if you're the CEO of the company, especially at the early stages. I don't mind the I don't know, which might seem counterintuitive to what I just said. But if I ask you some like a question about an obscure competitor or a competitor that you've never heard of, be honest. Like, hey, I don't know that competitor. That's not going to kill you. But what you need to do is say, hey, I'm not sure who that competitor is. Let me look into it and talk to my team, and then I'll get back with you tomorrow. The reason that I don't know is great. A, it can show that you can follow up. You need to be honest anyways. But B, it gives you an excuse to follow up. It gives you a reason to touch base. Say, hey, I'm not sure. You want to schedule time in a half hour? Like, want to schedule another half hour in a week and love to go through it with you. We'll do some research on our side, and I'm happy to come back with you. It gets another meeting on the calendar, or at least it gives you another touch point. The more touch points you have with investors, the better. And then it's a sale. The rest of these things are kind of salesy. Just like any other sales meeting, you're selling yourself when you're raising capital. Try and set the next meeting when you're in the current meeting. Make sure you set expectations well. If they ask you for financials and you don't have your financial projections done because you didn't listen to part 1 and part 2, make sure you set reasonable expectations of when you can get those done and to the investor. Don't say you're going to have them to them by the end of the day if you haven't built them. Set expectations really well of when you're going to get things done. Just a couple of things of not to do. We've talked about don't pitch valuation. Don't pitch valuation. If you go back to session 2 and listen to why, it's a really important thing. It can only hurt you, in my opinion, until you have a term sheet signed. Then it's okay. Don't make assumptions. And don't have happy ears. Now, happy ears, what's that? Founders, again, we're optimists. Happy ears are, hey, I'm really interested in your company. Would love to keep digging in and kind of take it to the next level. And sometimes entrepreneurs hear, oh, Brett soft committed. I didn't just soft commit. And then an entrepreneur might be even worse and say, go to the next meeting and say, hey, we have soft commitments from a variety of funds. And that next fund might ask you, oh, who is it? Oh, Brett soft committed. If I know that investor, they're going to back channel to me. I'm going to say, I didn't soft commit. And now you lost both of us. Be careful of getting happy ears. You don't have a commitment until you have a dollar figure committed. So until you say, hey, Brett, what I'm hearing is that you're interested in the round, and how much would you invest? Well, I'd probably invest about $500,000. Could I use your name in conversation? No, we're not ready to invest yet. We're not ready to commit yet, but that's about how much we would invest. So until you get until I tell you I am committed to this round and I give you a number, you don't have a commitment, in my opinion. Okay, closing. It's really hard. How do you close a round? How do you get people to commit? In the fundraising world, in the startup world, you get a lot of fence sitters, people that want to wait and see. And honestly, while it's annoying and a pain, I understand it. As an investor, if I can wait another couple of months to get a couple more months of data points, why would I commit today? The only reason I have to commit early is because I'm afraid that you're going to be able to raise the capital from somebody else and cut me out. And that can happen and does happen. But the relative risk of that in some cases is low. So you as the founder need to create that sense of urgency. Give me a reason to invest today. And we've talked about some tips and tricks throughout this process around how to bring people to close. But here's a few more. One is make sure you time your fundraising to all kind of start at the same time. You don't want your pitches to be long and drawn out. Because if you pitch one person a week for 10 weeks, it's kind of hard to drive that FOMO or that fear that another fund is going to come in and invest before me. But if you can stack all of your meetings, your first meetings in a 2-week period, when you're in one meeting, inevitably you're going to get asked, oh, how's the fundraise going? Oh, well, we just started, but I got 15 meetings this week. All of a sudden in my head, whoa, a lot of interest. They might get a commitment early on. I need to move fast on that. So try and stack your meetings close together so you can drive some of that scarcity or that fear of scarcity and that fear of missing out. Stack your meetings. It's also just going to help your fundraise process. So go to market right away with that entire list. Do all of your forwardable emails all at the same time. Stack your meetings. When you can travel, if you can travel to different markets, it's a great trick to say, hey, I'm going to go and set up what's called a roadshow. And to do a roadshow, you say, okay, in order to raise this round, I'm going to go to 3 cities. I'm going to go to Chicago, New York, and San Fran. And what you do is you just set a date on calendar. Say, hey, I'm going to be there Tuesday the 25th and Wednesday the 26th. I'm going to be in New York City. Then what you do is you get one meeting to anchor it, and then you work your network to get as many other possible meetings as you can while you're in New York. And then on Thursday, Friday, go to Chicago. And it has the same kind of effect. You go to New York to meet one, and inevitably you're going to be talking with the investor and you say, "Oh yeah, welcome." Are you just meeting with me? "Oh no, I got 3 other meetings in New York while I'm here." "Oh, and then I got to fly to Chicago, and I got 5 meetings while I'm in Chicago." Doing a roadshow is really helpful to drive that FOMO, but it also helps you get warm introductions, because when you're going to a city, oftentimes people are more likely to meet you than if you're not. So if you're going to New York, an investor that might be 50-50 on taking a meeting, if you're going to be there, it might put them over the edge to take that meeting. And then it's up to you once you're in front of them. Getting the meeting is half the battle. So you can do a roadshow. Another trick to try and move people to close is set a date. Now, this is a risky one because you can't set a date and miss it too many times. You might be able to have one miss where you set a date and you miss that close date. But once you've missed it once, people are going to start wondering and worrying if you keep doing it. But if you have 3/4 of your round committed, you're raising $1 million and you have $750,000 committed, and you have another $1 million of people that haven't told you yes but haven't told you no, fence sitters, which are really annoying, set a date. Set a date a few weeks out and say, "Hey, we're closing on March 30th. You got to let us know by the 21st if you're in or out." It's going to force the decision. And now you've got a little bit of momentum. People realize that the scarcity is there, that time scarcity factor, that if they don't invest, they might not be able to. Again, they're going to have to tell you yes or no. And it can move people off the fence. Again, that one's a bit risky and it can move people to no's. For early stage rounds, something that often happens is you have a bunch of people that'll be soft committed and they'll say, "Hey, once you have a lead investor, and you're just not able to get a lead investor. This is really happen. This happens a lot for companies that are trying to raise less than $1 million, where it's largely angels or non-institutions and nobody steps up to lead. In those cases, what you can do to close is you can do a self-led round. And so basically what you're going to do as a founder is you're going to go to whoever your most influential investor is that's committed so far, or your biggest check that's committed so far. Hopefully it's the same. And you're going to go to that person and say, "Hey, we have enough money to close the round. We just don't have a lead investor yet. What I'd like to do with you is talk to you about terms, and we'll self-lead. We'll have our lawyers prepare the documents, or we're going to use standard safe document or the NVCA standard documents together, so we can get this round closed because we have enough. Does a $5 million valuation sound fair to you?" Yes. And you just get that biggest, most influential person to commit to whatever terms they are. And then you go down the line and now you've self-led your round. You got to get that first person to commit to those terms, that then you can bring those terms to the other investors. And that can also move everyone to close in a round where if you never got a lead investor, it might otherwise fall apart. Don't be afraid to self-lead. One last tip on how to move people to close is continue to build a great business. You can't forget about your company. One thing that can drive momentum in FOMO is if you communicate on a monthly basis, "Hey, we're doing a little bit better. And we're doing a little bit better." Every month you're closing, or you're making product traction. You're making traction and making business product progress. You're executing against what you told the investors you would execute against. And then you're communicating it. During a fundraise, I recommend that startups and founders communicate with the investors that are in their pipeline on a weekly basis. You don't want to go longer than a week without touching an investor that's still interested in your round. You want to send them a touch point. You want to say, "Hey, this is what happened this week." Keep them interested. Show them your KPIs. Show that progress. Because what that's going to do is if I see you on a weekly basis as we're doing our diligence, making progress, I'm like, "Oh man, somebody else is going to jump in and do this round if we don't." Continue to show that business progress and that you can execute. That's the last tip of how you can move people to close. One last segment before we're done, or one last tip before we're done, is don't forget to communicate post-close as well. Your investors that you have today are some of the most valuable people when you go to raise again. If you don't communicate in the in-betweens, in the interim, they're not going to want to help you. They're not going to want to invest again. They're not going to want to make warm introductions for you. For a seed stage company, I recommend that you send a monthly investor update. Be a great communicator. Even if you don't talk to me on the phone, that's okay if I'm getting a monthly update with your KPIs. Just a couple things. You don't have to write a book every month. This is this is a quick overview of what happened last month. Here's something that went really well. Here's something that went really poorly. Here's our KPIs. And here's how you can help me. 5 things. That's all you need. 5 quick things in a monthly update. And I'm going to feel like you've kept me in the loop. So when you go to raise again, A, I've got some ammunition to use with investors I might make introductions for you. B, you might not ever get there because I see all the progress you're making and we might preempt your next round. And C, you're just going to keep your investors happy. You're not going to get people mad. Your current cap, people on your current cap table are a really valuable asset and should be a really valuable asset. But if you don't communicate with them post-close, they're not going to help you. In fact, they're going to hurt you. Because if you go to raise that next round and none of your current investors are investing, it's a huge red flag for that next round of investors. And it's probably going to kill your ability to fundraise. That's it. That's all we got for you. Hopefully you've taken at least 1 or 2 things out of this and from this new format of Brett's Brain. Hope you enjoyed it, and there's more to come.